A silent tram, a whispered confession, and two hearts unraveling in the dark. What did Jungkook say that changed everything forever? Don't pretend you don't remember that night, Jimin. The tram jolted as it curved along the empty tracks, metal grinding against metal in a sound too loud for how silent the city had become. Fluorescent lights flickered above them, stuttering like a dying heartbeat, casting pale, fractured shadows across the carriage. Outside, the windows reflected nothing but darkness. No passing cars, no glowing buildings, just the faint echo of a city that seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. Jimin didn't look up. His hands rested loosely on his lap, fingers curled inward like he was holding something invisible, something fragile. His reflection in the glass trembled slightly with every movement of the tram, his expression blurred, unreadable, until Jungkook leaned forward and their reflections overlapped. I said don't pretend, Jungkook repeated, softer this time, but sharper somehow, like a blade drawn closer to the skin. Jimin exhaled slowly, the breath almost soundless. I'm not pretending, he murmured, though his voice betrayed him with the slightest crack. I just don't think this is the place. Jungkook laughed under his breath. It wasn't amusement, it was something hollow, something strained. A deserted tram in the middle of the night, he said, glancing briefly around at the empty seats, the dim lights, the quiet that pressed in from all sides. Seems like the perfect place to finally stop running. Jimin's lips curved faintly, but it wasn't quite a smile. You always say that. And you always leave. The words lingered between them, heavier than the silence that followed. The tram passed under a flickering street lamp, and for a brief second, golden light flooded the carriage, illuminating every detail, the tension in Jungkook's jaw, the slight tremble in Jimin's fingers, the way their knees were almost touching, but not quite. Almost. Jungkook shifted. It was subtle at first, a small movement, the scrape of fabric against the seat, the quiet slide of his body inching closer. Jimin noticed immediately. Of course he did. He always noticed everything about Jungkook. You don't have to do that, Jimin said quietly, though he didn't move away. Do what? Close the distance, like it's going to fix anything. Jungkook didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying Jimin's face with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. There was something restless in his eyes, something unresolved, like a storm that had been building for too long without release. Maybe it won't fix anything, Jungkook finally said, but it might make you stop pretending there's nothing left between us. Jimin let out a quiet laugh, but it sounded tired, worn thin by something deeper than the moment. Nothing left, he echoed, shaking his head. You think that's what I've been pretending? Isn't it? The tram lurched again, harder this time, and Jimin's hand instinctively reached out, gripping the edge of the seat. Jungkook's hand moved at the same moment, their fingers brushing, just for a second, just enough to send a sharp, electric tension through both of them. Neither pulled away immediately. Jimin's gaze dropped to where their hands had touched, his breath catching. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to think. Then slowly, he withdrew his hand, placing it back in his lap like nothing had happened. But everything had. You're cruel, you know that, Jimin said softly. Jungkook frowned, cruel. You show up like this, Jimin continued, his voice calm but laced with something fragile, something close to breaking. After disappearing for months, after not answering a single message, and then you sit across from me and act like we can just pick up where we left off. I'm not acting like that. Then what are you doing? Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. I'm trying to understand why you never came after me. The words landed harder than anything else he had said. Jimin's head snapped up, eyes wide, something raw flashing across his face before he could hide it. You left, he said, almost incredulous. You're the one who walked away. Because I thought you wanted me to. Wanted you to? Jimin's voice rose slightly, disbelief bleeding through. When did I ever say that? You didn't have to say it, Jungkook replied, his tone tightening. You just had to keep looking at me like I was already gone. Silence fell again, thicker this time, harder to breathe through. Jimin looked away, his reflection in the window now clearer as the tram slowed near an empty station. The doors didn't open. No one got on. No one got off. It was as if the world outside had stopped existing, leaving only this narrow space, this suspended moment where everything unresolved demanded to be faced. "You don't get to rewrite what happened," Jimin said quietly. "You don't get to decide how I felt just because it makes it easier for you to leave." Jungkook leaned forward again, closer this time, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Then tell me how you felt." Jimin's throat tightened. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to me." "That's not enough." Jungkook's eyes searched his face, desperate and unwavering. "Then make it enough." Jimin shook his head, but his composure was slipping now, the carefully built walls cracking under the weight of everything he had tried to bury. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling despite his effort to steady it. "I stayed, I waited, I—" He stopped himself, biting down on the rest of the sentence like it would hurt too much to let it exist. Jungkook didn't let it go. "You what?" Jimin closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply as if trying to gather the courage he had lost somewhere along the way. When he opened them again, there was something different in them, something softer, but also more dangerous, like the truth was finally too close to the surface to be ignored. "I kept hoping you'd come back," he admitted. The words were barely louder than the hum of the tram, but they hit Jungkook with the force of something irreversible. Jungkook shifted again, this time not subtly. He moved across the small space between them until there was nothing left of it, until their knees pressed together, until the air between them felt too thin, too charged. Jimin's breath hitched, but he didn't move away. "Then why," Jungkook asked, his voice low, almost breaking, "did you look at me like you were ready to let me go?" Jimin's lips parted, but no answer came immediately. Instead, he looked down, a faint, trembling smile forming, not out of happiness, but something far more complicated, something that hurt and healed at the same time. "Because I was scared," he said finally. "Of what?" Jimin hesitated. Then slowly, he leaned in just enough that his voice wouldn't carry beyond the space between them. "Of how much I needed you to stay." Jungkook stilled. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow down to that single confession, to the quiet rhythm of their breathing, to the soft hum of the tram carrying them forward through a city that no longer mattered. Then Jungkook leaned even closer, his lips near Jimin's ear, his voice barely a whisper. "I never stopped needing you either." Jimin's smile trembled, his gaze dropping as if the weight of those words was too much to hold directly. But this time, he didn't pull away. And neither did Jungkook. The tram moved on, steady and unhurried, carrying them through the darkness, no longer apart, no longer pretending, but not yet certain of where the tracks ahead would lead. "You shouldn't have said that." Jimin's voice was barely steady, but it cut through the quiet with surprising force, like something fragile snapping under pressure. The tram rattled beneath them, the faint vibration traveling up through their legs where they still touched, neither of them pulling away, neither willing to break the contact first. Jungkook didn't move. "Why?" he asked, his voice still low but no longer hesitant. There was something firmer in it now, something that had been missing before. "Because it's true." Jimin let out a breath that sounded dangerously close to a laugh. "Truth isn't always something you just throw into the air like that," he said, shaking his head, though his gaze remained fixed somewhere near Jungkook's shoulder, not quite meeting his eyes. "Sometimes it ruins things." Jungkook tilted his head slightly, studying him. Things were already ruined. "That doesn't mean you make it worse." "Or maybe," Jungkook said, leaning in just a fraction closer, "it means we stop pretending we can keep them the way they were." That finally made Jimin look at him. Really look at him. There was something different about Jungkook tonight, something sharper, more deliberate. The hesitation that used to define him, the way he used to hold back just before saying too much, was gone. In its place was something almost reckless, like he had already decided that whatever happened next, he wasn't going to walk away again. It unsettled Jimin more than he expected. "You changed," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook's lips curved slightly, but there was no warmth in it. "I had to. Or you just decided to stop caring about what happens after you speak." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Jimin shot back, the edge in his voice finally surfacing. "Because this feels exactly like that. You come back out of nowhere, you say things you know I can't ignore, and then what? You disappear again when it gets too real." Jungkook's expression tightened. "I didn't disappear because it got too real," he said. "I disappeared because it already was." Jimin frowned, confusion flickering across his face. "That doesn't even make sense." "It does if you stop thinking about it like I left you." Jimin blinked, caught off guard by that. "What else would I think?" he demanded. "You walked away, Jungkook. You didn't call, you didn't explain, you just vanished. What was I supposed to do with that?" Jungkook leaned back slightly now, just enough to put a sliver of space between them, but his eyes never left Jimin's face. "You were supposed to stop me." The words hit harder than anything else. Jimin stared at him, disbelief slowly turning into something sharper, something angrier. "Stop you," he repeated. "You're blaming me now." "I'm not blaming you," Jungkook said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm saying I thought you would fight for me." Jimin let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "Fight for you?" he echoed. "You didn't give me anything to fight. You just decided, on your own, that leaving was the right thing, and you expected me to chase after you like I was supposed to fix it." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "I expected you to care enough to try." "I did care," Jimin snapped, the sudden rise in his voice echoing faintly in the empty carriage. "I cared so much it was suffocating, but I'm not going to beg someone to stay when they've already decided to go." The tram screeched slightly as it passed over a junction, the sound harsh, jarring, mirroring the tension that had finally broken loose between them. Jungkook leaned forward again, his voice dropping, more intense now. "You think I decided that easily?" "I don't know how you decided," Jimin shot back, "because you never told me." "That's because every time I tried," Jungkook said, his voice tightening, "you looked at me like you were already preparing for me to leave." Jimin froze. For a second, just a second, something uncertain flickered in his expression. Jungkook saw it. "You think I didn't notice?" he continued, quieter now but more cutting. "The way you started pulling back, the way you stopped asking me to stay late, the way you smile like everything was fine, but your eyes," he trailed off, his gaze softening just slightly. "Your eyes looked like you were bracing yourself." Jimin swallowed hard, his defenses faltering. "That's not." "It is," Jungkook interrupted gently. "You were scared." Jimin shook his head immediately. "So were you." "Yeah," Jungkook admitted without hesitation, "but I didn't hide it as well as you did." That landed differently. Jimin's lips parted, but no words came out this time. Instead, he looked away again, his reflection in the dark window staring back at him like someone he barely recognized. "You think I wanted you to leave," he said after a moment, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier sharpness. "But the truth is, I thought you were going to anyway." Jungkook stilled. "And I didn't know how to stop that," Jimin continued, his fingers tightening slightly in his lap. "So I tried to prepare myself for it. I thought if I acted like I could handle it, maybe it wouldn't destroy me when it happened." Jungkook's gaze softened, but there was still something unresolved in it, something that refused to settle. "So you let me believe you didn't need me." "I didn't let you believe that," Jimin said, shaking his head. "I just didn't know how to show you that I did without sounding desperate." A faint, humorless smile tugged at Jungkook's lips. Desperate would have been better than distant. Jimin huffed softly, but there was no real amusement in it. "Easy for you to say now." Another silence fell between them, but it felt different this time, not as suffocating, not as sharp. It was still heavy, still full of things left unsaid, but there was a shift in it, like something had finally cracked open enough to let the truth breathe. The tram slowed again, the dim lights outside flickering past the windows like ghosts of a city that used to be alive. Somewhere in the distance, a faint hum of electricity buzzed, blending with the steady rhythm of the tracks beneath them. Jungkook glanced toward the door, then back at Jimin. "We are not there yet," he said. Jimin frowned slightly, "Not where?" Jungkook didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached up, dragging a hand through his hair in a gesture that felt almost too familiar, too reminiscent of the way things used to be. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said finally. Jimin's chest tightened. "That doesn't surprise me." Jungkook exhaled slowly. "I didn't leave just because I thought you wanted me to." Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why did you leave?" Jungkook hesitated. For the first time since this conversation began, there was uncertainty in his expression again, like he was standing on the edge of something he wasn't sure he should reveal. Jimin noticed immediately. "What is it?" he pressed. Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him, as if trying to decide whether the truth would fix anything or break what little they had managed to rebuild in this moment. Then he spoke. "I left because someone told me to stay away from you." The words landed like a sudden drop, sharp and disorienting. Jimin's brows furrowed. "What?" Jungkook held his gaze, steady now, no longer hesitating. "They said if I didn't, you'd get hurt." A chill ran through the air between them, subtle but undeniable. Jimin shook his head slightly, confusion giving way to disbelief. "That doesn't make any sense," he said. "Who would say that, and why would you listen to them?" Jungkook's expression darkened just slightly, because they knew things they shouldn't have known. Jimin felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of things?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. The tram lights flickered again, once, twice, plunging the carriage into near darkness before stabilizing again. For a brief moment, their reflections disappeared entirely, leaving only the faint outline of each other in the dim light. When the lights returned, Jungkook was already watching him. "Things about you," he said quietly, "things you never told me." Jimin's breath caught. For the first time that night, real fear, not confusion, not anger, but something deeper slipped into his expression. "That's not possible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jungkook leaned in slightly, his voice dropping again, more intense now. "Then why did they know exactly where you'd be tonight?" "That's not possible." Jimin's voice came out too fast, too sharp, like he was trying to cut the idea down before it could take shape. But his eyes betrayed him. There was a flicker there, recognition, fear, something buried too deep to hide completely. Jungkook saw it instantly. "You hesitated," he said quietly. "I didn't," Jimin snapped, but his tone lacked its earlier confidence. He shifted in his seat, finally breaking the contact between their knees, creating space where there had been none. The absence felt louder than the closeness had. "You did," Jungkook insisted, leaning forward again, unwilling to let the distance settle. "Just now, when I said they knew where you'd be." Jimin looked away, jaw tightening. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Jungkook's voice sharpened. "Then look at me and say it again." For a moment, Jimin didn't move. The tram hummed beneath them, the rhythm steady, almost hypnotic. Outside, the darkness seemed thicker now, pressing closer against the windows, as if the city itself was listening. Slowly, reluctantly, Jimin turned his head. Their eyes met. "I'm not hiding anything," Jimin said. It sounded convincing. Too convincing. Jungkook let out a quiet breath, shaking his head slightly. "You've always been good at that," he murmured, saying things like they're true until even you start believing them. Jimin's expression hardened. "You don't get to say that like you know me better than I know myself." "I did," Jungkook replied immediately. "At least, I thought I did." The words hung between them, heavy with something unspoken. Jimin's gaze faltered for a split second, then returned, sharper now. So what, you think there's some secret life I've been hiding from you, that someone out there knows me better than you do? I think, Jungkook said slowly, carefully, that someone knew enough to make me leave. Jimin let out a frustrated breath, running a hand through his hair. And you just believed them, he demanded. No questions, no proof, nothing. You just took their word and disappeared. It wasn't just their word, Jungkook said. Then what was it? Jungkook hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Jimin's eyes narrowed, something shifting behind them, something darker. What did they show you? Jungkook didn't answer immediately, but the silence stretched just long enough to confirm it. They showed you something, Jimin repeated, quieter now, but far more dangerous. What was it? The tram lights flickered again, dimming slightly, casting their faces into deeper shadow. Jungkook's features sharpened under the uneven light, his expression caught somewhere between anger and something far more complicated. It was a video, he said finally. Jimin went still. A video, he echoed, his voice barely audible. Jungkook nodded once, slow, yeah. What kind of video? Jungkook's jaw tightened. You know what kind? No, Jimin said immediately, shaking his head. I don't, so say it. Jungkook leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, controlled edge. It was you. Jimin's breath hitched. With someone else. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jimin didn't blink, didn't move. For a moment, it was as if his entire body had locked in place, every muscle frozen under the weight of what had just been said. Then, you're lying. The words came out flat, but there was a tremor underneath them. Jungkook shook his head slowly. I wish I was. That's not possible, Jimin said again, more forcefully this time. I've never. You were in a room, Jungkook cut in, his voice tightening, dim lights. There was music playing in the background. You were wearing. He stopped himself, exhaling sharply. I don't need to describe it, I saw it. Jimin's face paled, but not in the way Jungkook expected. It wasn't guilt. It was something else. Something closer to realization. No, Jimin whispered, more to himself than to Jungkook. No, that's not. You don't even deny it. Jungkook's voice cracked slightly, frustration bleeding through. You're just going to stand there and act confused. I am confused, Jimin snapped, the sudden surge of emotion breaking through his composure, because I have no idea what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. I can't explain something that didn't happen. It did happen, Jungkook shot back, his voice rising for the first time. I saw you, Jimin. I saw you with my own eyes. Jimin stood abruptly, the sudden movement making the tram seem smaller, tighter. He ran a hand over his face, packing a step before stopping again, his breathing uneven. This is insane, he muttered. This is actually insane. Jungkook stood too, unable to stay seated while everything unraveled in front of him. You think I wanted to believe it? He demanded. You think I wanted to see that and just walk away like it didn't matter? Then why didn't you ask me? Jimin fired back, turning on him. Why didn't you come to me and say, hey, I saw this, explain it? Why did you just leave? Because I thought I already had my answer. And what answer was that? Jimin's voice trembled now, anger and hurt colliding. That I betrayed you, that everything we had meant nothing. Jungkook hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Jimin laughed, but it was hollow, sharp, breaking at the edges. Wow, he said under his breath. So that's it, that's what you thought of me. It's not what I wanted to think, Jungkook said quickly, but what else was I supposed to? Trust me, Jimin interrupted, his voice cracking. You were supposed to trust me. The words hit harder than any accusation. Jungkook's expression faltered. I trusted you, Jimin continued, quieter now but far more devastating. Even when you started pulling away, even when I could feel you slipping, I trusted that there was a reason. I didn't jump to conclusions. I didn't assume the worst. Jungkook looked at him, something shifting in his eyes. But you, Jimin said, shaking his head slowly, you saw one thing, something I don't even recognize, and you decided that was enough to erase everything. It wasn't just one thing, Jungkook said, but his voice had lost its earlier certainty. Jimin stepped closer now, closing the distance again, but this time it wasn't soft, wasn't hesitant. It was charged, confrontational. Then tell me something, he said, his voice low but intense. In that video, did I look like I wanted to be there? Jungkook froze. The question caught him off guard. He stopped, replaying the memory in his head, the fragments of it that had haunted him for months. You looked. He trailed off. Jimin didn't let him escape it. Did I look like I chose it? He pressed. Jungkook's silence stretched too long. And in that silence, something shifted completely. Jimin saw it. Oh my God, he whispered, the realization hitting him like a sudden drop. You didn't even question it. Jungkook's chest tightened. Jimin. You didn't even stop to think that maybe something was wrong, Jimin continued, his voice trembling now, but not from weakness, from something sharper, something furious and hurt all at once. You just assumed I would do that to you. I didn't assume. You did, Jimin said firmly, because if you hadn't, you would have come to me. Jungkook had no answer for that. The tram slowed again, the faint sound of brakes hissing through the air. Outside, dim lights flickered past, another empty station, another place where no one was waiting. Inside, the tension felt unbearable. Jimin took a step back this time, his expression shifting, something closing off behind his eyes. Who sent it to you? He asked suddenly. Jungkook blinked. What? The video, Jimin clarified, his voice steadier now colder. Who sent it? Jungkook hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. It came from an unknown number. Jimin nodded slowly, like he expected that answer. And they told you to stay away from me, he continued, or I'd get hurt. Yeah. Jimin let out a quiet breath, looking down for a moment before lifting his gaze again. There was something different in his expression now, something resolved, something that hadn't been there before. Then you need to listen to me very carefully, he said. Jungkook's chest tightened at the shift in his tone. Because if someone sent you that, Jimin continued, each word deliberate, it means they want you to believe I betrayed you. Jungkook frowned slightly. Why would anyone want that? Jimin held his gaze. Because if you don't trust me, he said quietly, then you won't stay close enough to find out what's really going on. A chill ran through the space between them. Jungkook's mind raced, pieces clicking together in a way that felt both sudden and deeply unsettling. You think someone trying to separate us? I don't think, Jimin said. I know. Jungkook stared at him. How? Jimin hesitated. For a moment, it looked like he might say something more, but then the tram lights flickered violently, plunging the carriage into darkness for a split second before snapping back on. And when they did, Jimin's gaze had shifted past Jungkook toward the far end of the tram. His expression changed instantly. All the tension, all the anger, it vanished, replaced by something far more urgent. Jungkook, he said quietly. Something in his tone made Jungkook turn. At the far end of the carriage, where there had been nothing but empty seats before, someone was standing there. Don't turn around. Jimin's voice came out sharp, low, urgent, so different from anything he had used before that Jungkook froze mid-movement. The instinct to look was immediate, almost uncontrollable, but something in Jimin's tone held him in place. Too late. Jungkook had already seen the reflection. Not directly, not fully, but in the darkened glass of the tram window, where the flickering lights stretched shadows into distorted shapes, there it was, a figure, standing still, watching. The air shifted. Jimin, Jungkook whispered. I said don't look, Jimin repeated, his voice tighter now, his body angling slightly closer as if proximity alone could shield them. just listen to me. Jungkook swallowed hard, forcing his gaze back to Jimin, though his pulse had already started racing. Who is that? Jimin didn't answer right away. And that silence said everything. You know them, Jungkook pressed. Jimin's jaw clenched. I had a feeling, he murmured. But I didn't think it would happen like this. Like what? Jungkook demanded, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. Jimin, what is going on? Jimin's eyes flicked toward the end of the tram again, quick, calculating. The figure hadn't moved. That made it worse. Okay, Jimin said under his breath, more to himself than to Jungkook. Okay, this changes things. What changes? Jungkook snapped, frustration cutting through the fear. You keep saying things like that without actually explaining anything. I'm trying to keep you safe. Then start by telling me the truth. The words came out louder than intended, echoing faintly through the empty carriage. The figure at the end of the tram shifted. Just slightly. But enough. Jimin's hand shot out instantly, gripping Jungkook's wrist. Lower your voice, he hissed. Do you want them to hear you? Jungkook stared at him, incredulous. They're already here. I think that part's covered. Jimin tightened his grip, his fingers cold. You don't understand how this works. Then make me understand. Another flicker of the lights. For a brief second, the carriage plunged into shadow, and when the light returned, the figure had moved closer. Not much, but enough to erase any doubt that they were being watched. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin. I see it, Jimin said quickly, his voice steady but his eyes sharp with tension. Don't panic. I'm not panicking, Jungkook said, though his pulse betrayed him. I just want to know why someone is following us on an empty tram in the middle of the night. Jimin exhaled slowly, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. Because they want you to see them. Jungkook frowned. What? If they wanted to stay hidden, they would have, Jimin explained, his voice low and controlled. This isn't about sneaking around, it's about making a point. What kind of point? Jimin's grip on his wrist tightened just slightly. That we're already too late. The words sent a cold weight settling into Jungkook's chest. Too late for what? He asked. Jimin hesitated. And that hesitation was becoming a pattern Jungkook was starting to hate. Jimin, he said more forcefully this time, no more half answers, not now. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in his expression again. Not fear, not anger. Decision. You remember the last week before you left? Jimin asked suddenly. Jungkook blinked, caught off guard by the shift. Of course I do. Do you remember the night we argued? Not the big one, the one before that. Jungkook frowned, trying to recall. The one where you kept checking your phone. Jimin nodded once. Yeah. You said it was nothing. It was. Jungkook's chest tightened. Then what was it? Jimin glanced past him again, making sure the figure hadn't moved any closer before leaning in, his voice dropping to almost nothing. I was being followed. Jungkook's mind stalled. What? For weeks, Jimin continued, his words quick now, like he had finally crossed a line he couldn't uncross. At first, I thought it was nothing, just coincidence. Same person at different places, same feeling of being watched, but nothing concrete. And you didn't tell me, Jungkook's voice sharpened immediately. I didn't want to drag you into it. You don't get to make that decision for me, Jungkook shot back. I was trying to protect you. And how did that work out? Jungkook demanded, gesturing vaguely between them. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like it made everything worse. Jimin flinched slightly at that, but didn't argue. Then the messages started, he continued instead. Jungkook stilled. Messages. Jimin nodded. Anonymous. At first they were vague, just hints, like someone watching me, knowing where I was, what I was doing. A chill ran down Jungkook's spine. And then, he asked quietly. And then they got specific. Jimin said, his voice tightening. They started mentioning you. Jungkook's stomach dropped. What about me? They said if I didn't stay away from you, Jimin said slowly, carefully, you'd get hurt. The air seemed to collapse inward. Jungkook shook his head immediately. No, that doesn't make sense. Why would anyone? I don't know, Jimin cut in, frustration finally bleeding through. I don't know why, I just know what they said. And you believed them? Jungkook asked, the hurt creeping back into his voice. I didn't at first, Jimin admitted, but then. He stopped. Jungkook's eyes narrowed, but then what? Jimin's gaze flickered toward the end of the tram again. The figure had moved closer. Close enough now that Jungkook could make out more details. A dark coat, a stillness that didn't feel natural, like they were too controlled, too deliberate. Watching. Waiting. Jimin swallowed hard. But then they sent me something, he said quietly. Jungkook's chest tightened instantly. The video. Jimin nodded. And that's when you started pulling away, Jungkook realized. Yes. Jungkook let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. So instead of telling me, you just decided to act like you didn't care anymore. I thought it would keep you safe. It didn't, Jungkook said immediately. It just made me think you didn't want me. I know that now. Do you? Jungkook stepped closer, his voice low but intense. Because from where I was standing, it felt like you gave up on me without a fight. I didn't give up, Jimin said, his voice breaking slightly. I was trying to survive it. Jungkook froze. Something in that word, survive, hit differently. You're still not telling me everything, he said quietly. Jimin hesitated again. And Jungkook's patience snapped. Stop doing that, he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the air. Stop acting like I can't handle the truth. I'm already in this, whether you like it or not. Jimin looked at him, something raw flickering across his face. You don't understand how dangerous this is. Then let me decide that for myself. Another silence. Heavier, final. Jimin exhaled slowly, like he was surrendering to something inevitable. Okay, he said, then listen carefully. Jungkook didn't move. Whoever's behind this, Jimin continued, they don't just watch, they manipulate, they create situations, they push people into doing things they wouldn't normally do. Jungkook frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying, Jimin said, his voice dropping, that video you saw, I don't remember it happening. Jungkook's heart skipped. What? I don't remember being there, Jimin repeated, his expression tense, but I know it's real, which means. Which means what? Jungkook pressed. Jimin's gaze locked onto his. It means someone is controlling the narrative, he said, and we're both part of it. The tram lights flickered again, harder this time, longer. Darkness swallowed the carriage. And in that darkness, a sound. Footsteps. Closer. When the lights snapped back on, the figure was no longer at the end of the tram. They were only a few rows away. Watching. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin's grip on his wrist tightened. Don't react, Jimin whispered. Whatever you do, don't give them what they want. But it was already too late for that. Because the figure tilted their heads slightly. And then, slowly, they smiled. Don't move. Jimin's voice was barely a breath against Jungkook's ear, but it carried a sharp urgency that rooted him in place. The figure's smile lingered in the dim light, unnatural, controlled, like it had been practiced rather than felt. Jungkook's instincts screamed at him to act, to stand, to demand answers, but something deeper, something colder held him back. Who are you? Jungkook asked anyway, his voice low but steady, cutting through the suffocating quiet. The figure didn't answer. They just watched. The tram rattled forward, the metallic hum now unbearable, filling the silence that the stranger refused to break. The flickering lights above buzzed faintly, casting shadows that stretched and distorted across the floor, crawling up the walls like something alive. Jimin shifted slightly closer, his shoulder brushing Jungkook, but his gaze never left the figure. "You're not supposed to talk to them," he murmured. Jungkook frowned. "Not supposed to." "They want engagement," Jimin said. "Reaction, that's how they control the situation." Jungkook let out a quiet, incredulous breath. "And what, if we just sit here quietly, they'll leave?" "No," Jimin said, "but they'll show their hand eventually." The figure took another step forward. Slow, measured. Now only a few feet away. Jungkook could finally see their face more clearly, but something was off. Not hidden, not masked, but blank. Not expressionless, but controlled in a way that didn't feel natural, like every movement was deliberate, calculated. Like they weren't here to act human. "Jungkook," the figure said suddenly. "His name." Jungkook's entire body tensed. Jimin's grip tightened instantly. "Don't respond." But Jungkook couldn't help it. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. The figure's smile deepened slightly, not warmer, just sharper. "You've always been easier to reach," they said. Jimin's breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. "Stop talking to them," he said under his breath, more urgently now. "You're giving them exactly what they want." Jungkook shook his head slightly, eyes locked on the stranger. "No, I want answers." "You won't get them like this." "Then how?" Jimin didn't answer. The figure took another step closer. Too close now. Close enough that the air between them felt charged, suffocating. "You already saw it, didn't you?" the figure said, their voice smooth, almost conversational. "The video." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "What did you do to him?" A soft, quiet laugh escaped the figure's lips. "Interesting," they murmured. "You don't even ask if it's real anymore." Jungkook's voice sharpened. "I'm asking you what you did." "What makes you think I did anything?" The figure replied calmly. "Maybe you just didn't know him as well as you thought." "Stop," Jimin snapped suddenly, stepping forward, placing himself slightly between Jungkook and the figure. "You don't get to twist it like that." The figure tilted their head, studying Jimin now with a new kind of interest. "There it is," they said softly, "the protective instinct. A little late, don't you think?" Jimin's eyes hardened. "What do you want?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they reached into their coat pockets slowly. Jungkook tensed, instinctively stepping forward, but Jimin's arm shot out, stopping him again. "Wait!" The figure pulled out a phone. Jungkook's stomach dropped. "No," he whispered. The screen lit up. And even from where they stood, Jungkook could see it. A paused frame. That video. Jimin saw it too, and this time the reaction was unmistakable. Not guilt. Not recognition. Fear. Real, unfiltered fear. "You shouldn't watch this again," the figure said lightly. "It didn't end well the first time." Jungkook stepped forward despite Jimin's hold, his voice tight. "Play it." Jimin's head snapped toward him. "No. I need to see it." "You don't," Jimin insisted, his voice breaking slightly. "Jungkook, please." "I said play it," Jungkook repeated louder now, his eyes locked on the figure. The figure smiled faintly. "Careful," they murmured. "You might not like what you find." "Play it." A beat of silence. Then, the video started. The tram seemed to fall away. The sound of the tracks, the flickering lights, the presence of the stranger, it all blurred into the background as Jungkook's attention locked onto the screen. Jimin reached out instinctively, as if to stop it, but his hand froze midair. He couldn't look away. Neither of them could. The video was exactly as Jungkook remembered. Dim lighting, a small room, music playing faintly in the background. And Jimin. There was no denying it. Same face, same voice, same movements. But something was wrong. Subtly wrong. Jungkook saw it now in a way he hadn't before. The way Jimin's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The way his movements felt just slightly delayed, like he was reacting instead of acting. Like he wasn't fully there. "Do you see it?" the figure asked softly. Jungkook didn't answer. His mind was racing, trying to process the details he had missed before, the inconsistencies that now stood out like fractures in glass. Jimin's hand dropped slowly back to his side. "That's not me," he whispered. The figure chuckled, "But it is." "No," Jimin said, more firmly now, though his voice still trembled. "That's not me." "Then explain it." "I can't," Jimin admitted, "but I know it's not me." The video continued playing. Jungkook's chest tightened as he watched, his earlier anger dissolving into something far more unsettling. Doubt, confusion, and something else. Something worse. Because now he wasn't sure what he was seeing anymore. The video ended. Silence crashed back into the tram. The figure lowered the phone, their gaze flicking between them. "Well," they asked. Jungkook didn't speak immediately. His eyes moved slowly from the screen to Jimin. Jimin looked back at him, something raw and vulnerable in his expression, something that hadn't been there before. "Do you believe me now?" he asked quietly. Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation hurt more than anything. Jimin's expression flickered just for a second, but it was enough. "I told you," he said softly, almost to himself. "I told you this would happen." "That's not," Jungkook started, but the words felt wrong before they even left his mouth. Because he didn't know what to believe anymore. The figure watched them carefully, as if studying the cracks forming between them. "This is the problem with truth," they said lightly. "It's never as simple as you want it to be." Jimin's gaze snapped back to them, anger flaring again. "What did you do to me?" The figure smiled again. But this time, there was something colder in it. "Nothing you didn't allow." Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook frowned. "What does that mean?" The figure stepped back slightly, slipping the phone back into their pocket. "It means," they said slowly, "that you're both exactly where you were meant to be." Jungkook's pulse spiked. "By who?" The figure's smile faded, just slightly. And for the first time, something darker slipped through. "You're asking the wrong question." A sudden screech of metal cut through the air as the tram began to slow, harder than before, more abrupt. The lights flickered violently. The doors at the far end hissed open. The figure glanced toward them briefly, then back at Jungkook and Jimin. "We'll be seeing each other again," they said. And then they stepped off. Gone. Just like that. The doors slammed shut. The tram lurched forward again, leaving the empty platform behind, swallowing the figure back into the darkness of the city. Inside, the silence felt heavier than ever. Jungkook didn't move. Didn't speak. His mind was still stuck on the video, on the cracks he couldn't unsee, on the possibility that everything he thought he knew might be wrong. Jimin was watching him. Waiting. Afraid. "Say something," Jimin whispered. Jungkook exhaled slowly, dragging a hand over his face. "I don't know what to think," he admitted. Jimin's chest tightened. "But I know one thing," Jungkook continued, his voice quieter now, more certain. "That wasn't you." Jimin's breath hitched. Relief flooded his expression, but it was fragile, uncertain, like it could shatter at any second. "You believe me?" he asked. Jungkook looked at him. Really looked at him. And this time, he didn't hesitate. "I believe you." Jimin's eyes softened, something breaking open in them, something that had been locked away for too long. But Jungkook wasn't done. But that doesn't mean I'm not angry, he added. The words landed sharp. Jimin nodded slowly. You have every right to be. I needed you to trust me, Jungkook said, his voice tightening again, and you didn't. I was trying to protect you, and you ended up hurting me instead. I know. Another silence. Not empty, not distant, but heavy with everything they were finally saying out loud. Jungkook stepped closer again, closing the space between them, his voice dropping. No more secrets, he said. Jimin held his gaze. No more secrets, he agreed. The tram continued forward, deeper into the night. But now, for the first time, they weren't just running from something. They were moving toward it. Then tell me everything. Jungkook's voice was no longer raised, no longer sharp, but it carried something heavier now, something immovable, the kind of tone that didn't leave room for escape. Jimin felt it. The tram roared softly beneath them as it pushed forward into another stretch of darkness, the windows reflecting nothing but the two of them standing too close, too exposed, with nowhere left to hide. I already told you what matters, Jimin said, but even as the words left him, he knew they wouldn't be enough. Jungkook shook his head slowly. No, you told me what you thought would protect me. Jimin's jaw tightened. I want the truth, Jungkook continued, stepping even closer until their shoulders almost brushed again. Not the version you edited to keep me at a distance, not the version that makes you feel like you're in control, the real one. Jimin let out a slow breath, his eyes flickering away for just a second before returning to Jungkook's face. You're not going to like it, he said quietly. Jungkook didn't hesitate. I don't care. That's what you said before you walked away. The words landed harder than expected. Jungkook flinched, barely but enough. Don't twist this, he said, his voice tightening again. I walked away because I thought you betrayed me. And I let you believe that, Jimin replied, softer now, the weight of that admission pressing down on him. So yes, I twisted it too. Silence settled again, but it wasn't avoidance anymore. It was something closer to surrender. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing a step before stopping again. The tram lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly, casting shifting shadows across his face. They didn't just send messages, he said finally. They called. Jungkook stilled. You never mentioned that. I didn't want to make it real, Jimin admitted. Messages can be ignored. Calls feel different. Jungkook's chest tightened. What did they say? Jimin's lips pressed together, like he was forcing himself to relive something he had tried hard to bury. At first nothing, he said. They call and there'd just be silence, breathing sometimes, or static, like a bad connection. Jungkook frowned. That's creepy, but that's not enough to make you. They knew things, Jungkook, Jimin cut in, his voice sharper now, things no one else should have known. Jungkook hesitated. Like what? Jimin's gaze dropped for a moment. Like what I said to you the night it rained, he said quietly. Jungkook's heart skipped. That memory hit instantly, clear, vivid. The two of them standing under broken streetlight, soaked through, laughing at nothing, until the laughter had faded into something quieter, something heavier. The moment Jimin had almost said something more, but didn't. What about it? Jungkook asked. They repeated it, Jimin said. Jungkook went still. Word for word. The tram seemed to grow colder. That's not possible, Jungkook murmured. I know, Jimin said. That's what I thought too, but they didn't stop there. They started describing things I hadn't told anyone, places I'd been alone, thoughts I hadn't said out loud. Jungkook's pulse quickened. You think they were watching you that closely? I think, Jimin said slowly, they were closer than I realized. The words lingered, unsettling in a way that made Jungkook's skin prickle. Closer how? He asked. Jimin looked up at him again, his expression tightening. I think someone I trusted might be involved. Jungkook's stomach dropped. What? I don't know who, Jimin added quickly, and I don't know how deep it goes, but nothing else makes sense. Jungkook shook his head, trying to process it. You're saying someone we know could be behind this. I'm saying someone had access to things they shouldn't have. Jungkook exhaled sharply, packing a step now himself, his mind racing. And instead of telling me, you decided to handle it alone. I didn't know who to trust, Jimin said. You could have trusted me. I wanted to, Jimin admitted, his voice breaking slightly, but what if it was you? The words hit like a sudden impact. Jungkook froze. What? He whispered. Jimin flinched immediately. I didn't mean. No, Jungkook said, his voice tightening, hurt cutting through again. Say it. You thought I might be part of this. Jimin shook his head quickly. Not like that, not consciously, but if someone was manipulating things, if they were controlling situations, I didn't know how far it went. So you doubted me. I doubted everything, Jimin corrected, but it didn't soften the blow. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, dragging a hand over his face. That's great, he muttered. So while I was out there thinking you didn't want me, you were here wondering if I was some kind of, what, spy? That's not fair. Neither is this, Jungkook snapped, his voice rising again. You keep saying you were trying to protect me, but all you did was push me away and assume the worst. I didn't assume the worst, Jimin shot back, frustration finally breaking through again. I was trying to survive something I didn't understand. And now you expect me to just step back into that like nothing happened. I'm not asking for that. Then what are you asking for? Jimin hesitated. And this time, the hesitation wasn't avoidance. It was vulnerability. I'm asking you to stay, he said quietly. The words hung between them, fragile but undeniable. Jungkook stared at him, his anger faltering just slightly. Even after everything, he asked. Yes, even if this gets worse. Jimin didn't look away. It will, he said honestly, but I don't want to face it alone anymore. Jungkook's chest tightened. For a moment, the tension between them shifted again, not disappearing, not resolving, but softening just enough to let something else through. Something real. You should have said that before, Jungkook murmured. I know. Jungkook exhaled slowly, the fight draining out of him just a little. You're really bad at this, you know that. Jimin huffed softly, a faint, tired smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, I've been told. Jungkook stepped closer again, the distance between them disappearing once more, but this time it felt different, not confrontational, not forced. Deliberate. If I stay, Jungkook said, his voice low, steady, you don't get to shut me out again. I won't. No more deciding things for both of us. I won't. And if something like that video happens again, Jungkook continued, his gaze intense, you come to me first, no hesitation. Jimin nodded, I promise. Jungkook studied him for a moment longer, as if weighing the sincerity of those words. Then, he reached out. Not hesitantly, not cautiously. His hand found Jimin's wrist, fingers wrapping around it firmly, grounding. I mean it, Jungkook said. Jimin's breath caught slightly at the contact, but he didn't pull away. I know, he said softly. For a brief moment, everything else faded. The tram, the darkness outside, the lingering presence of something watching from beyond what they could see. It was just them. Again. But different. Stronger. More fragile. More real. Then, the tram lights flickered violently. Both of them froze. A sharp screech echoed as the tram began to slow again, but this time it felt wrong, too sudden, too forced. The overhead lights dimmed, then flared, then dimmed again, plunging parts of the carriage into shadow. What is that? Jungkook muttered, glancing around. Jimin's expression tightened instantly. This isn't a scheduled stop. The tram jerked hard. The doors slid open with a loud, mechanical hiss. Outside. Nothing. No station. No lights. Just darkness stretching endlessly beyond the tracks. A cold draft swept into the carriage. Jungkook's grip on Jimin tightened instinctively. Tell me this is normal. It's not, Jimin said quietly. The darkness outside felt wrong. Not just empty, but watching. Waiting. And then, a sound. Not from outside. From inside. Behind them. Slow. Measured. Footsteps. Jimin's breath stilled. Jungkook turned his head slowly. And his heart dropped. Because this time, there wasn't just one figure. There were three. Don't let go. Jimin's voice came out sharper than ever before, his fingers tightening around Jungkook's wrist as if that single point of contact was the only thing anchoring them to reality. The tram stood frozen, doors open to an endless stretch of darkness that felt less like an absence of light and more like something alive, something breathing just beyond the threshold. Jungkook didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the reflection in the glass, three figures now standing behind them where there had been nothing moments before, still, silent, watching. The air turned heavy. Jimin, he whispered, barely able to form the name. I see them, Jimin said immediately, his voice controlled but tense. Don't turn around too fast. Too late. Jungkook turned anyway. The movement was instinctive, sharp, and the moment his eyes landed on them directly, something inside his chest twisted violently. They weren't identical, but they moved like they were. Three figures, same dark coats, same unnatural stillness. Their faces visible now, but wrong in a way that was hard to define, not distorted, not hidden, just empty of something essential, like the humanity had been stripped out and replaced with imitation. And their eyes. They were all fixed on Jungkook. Interesting, one of them said, tilting their head slightly. He reacts faster than you predicted. Jimin stepped forward instantly, pulling Jungkook slightly behind him. Stay back, he said under his breath. Jungkook frowned, adrenaline spiking. No, I'm not staying behind you. Jungkook. I'm not doing that again, Jungkook cut in, his voice low but firm. I'm not standing back while you deal with everything alone. Jimin hesitated, and in that hesitation, something softened briefly in his expression, but it didn't last. Then stay close, he said instead. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. One of the figures chuckled softly. There it is, they murmured, the loyalty that's new. Jungkook's gaze snapped to them. What do you want? Another figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You're still asking that, they said, after everything we've shown you. Yeah, Jungkook shot back, because none of it makes any sense. That's because you're still trying to understand it from the outside. Jimin's voice cut in sharp, then explain it. The figures went quiet for a moment, exchanging glances, not in a natural way, but in perfect synchronization, like mirrors reflecting the same thought at once. Then one of them spoke again. You were never meant to see it this early, they said, their gaze settling on Jimin, but you forced our hand. Jimin's jaw tightened. By what existing? By resisting. The word echoed strangely, like it carried more weight than it should. Jungkook frowned, resisting what? The figure's gaze shifted back to him. Control. Silence fell. Jungkook let out a short, disbelieving breath. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Jimin shook his head. No, you don't get to speak in riddles, not anymore. If you're going to drag us into this, you explain it. One of the figures stepped closer. Too close. Careful, they said softly. You're starting to sound like you have leverage. Jimin didn't back down. Maybe I do. The figure smiled faintly. You don't. The tension snapped tighter. Jungkook stepped forward now, refusing to stay behind Jimin any longer. Then why go through all of this? He demanded. The messages, the video, the threats, what's the point? The three figures fell silent again. Then, all three spoke at once. To see which version of you would break first. A chill shot through Jungkook's entire body. Version, he repeated. Jimin's breath caught. You're lying, Jimin said immediately, but there was a crack in his voice now. Are we, one of them replied calmly, or are you just starting to remember? Jimin froze. Jungkook turned to him instantly. Remember what? Jimin didn't answer. His expression had changed again, this time not fear, not anger, but something deeper, something fractured. Jimin, Jungkook pressed, his voice tightening. What are they talking about? Jimin shook his head slowly, like he was trying to push something away. I don't. Yes, you do, one of the figures interrupted. You've always known, you just chose not to see it. That's not true. Then why don't you remember the video? Jimin's breath faltered. The tram lights flickered violently again, plunging half the carriage into shadow. The darkness outside seemed to press closer, as if drawn in by the tension building inside. Jungkook stepped closer to Jimin, his voice softer now but urgent. Jimin, what's happening? I don't know, Jimin whispered, but it sounded less certain than before. Yes, you do, another figure said. You remember pieces, you just haven't put them together yet. Stop it, Jimin snapped louder now. Stop acting like you know me. We do know you, they replied calmly, better than he does. Jungkook's expression hardened instantly. Don't. The single word cut through the air like a blade. All three figures turned their attention to him. Don't what? One of them asked. Don't talk about him like that, Jungkook said, stepping forward, placing himself beside Jimin instead of behind him. You don't get to define who he is. A flicker of something, interest, perhaps passed through their expressions. Still defending him, one murmured, even now. Jungkook didn't waver, especially now. Jimin glanced at him, something unspoken passing between them, something fragile, something fierce. The figures noticed. That, one of them said softly, is exactly why this is so fascinating. Jungkook frowned. What is? The bond, they replied, even after doubt, even after betrayal, even after everything we showed you, you still choose him. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Yes. Jimin's breath caught slightly. The figures exchanged another synchronized glance. Then let's test that, one of them said. Before either of them could react, the tram lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Jungkook's grip on Jimin tightened instantly. Jimin. I'm here, Jimin said, his voice close, grounding. Then, a sound. Not footsteps. Not movement. A voice. But not from the figures. From somewhere else. From everywhere. Jungkook. Jungkook froze. His eyes widened in the darkness. That voice. It was Jimin's. But Jimin was right next to him. Do you trust me? Jungkook's heart started pounding violently. Jimin, he whispered. I'm here, Jimin said again, his voice firm, real. But the other voice came again. Closer. Softer. More intimate. You didn't before, why now? Jungkook's grip tightened painfully around Jimin's wrist. What is that? Jimin didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice wasn't steady. It's not real, he said. But it didn't sound like he believed it. The darkness seemed to shift, pressing in around them, distorting the space, warping the sound. The voice came again. This time, right behind Jungkook's ear. If you trust him, prove it. Jungkook turned sharply, but there was nothing there. Nothing but darkness. Then, the lights snapped back on, and everything changed. Because Jimin was no longer standing next to him. Instead, he was across the tram, held firmly by one of the figures, and the other two were standing right beside Jungkook, watching, waiting. Now, one of them said softly, "Let's see what you choose." "Let him go." Jungkook's voice came out low and sharp, cutting through the suffocating silence of the tram as his eyes locked onto Jimin, held tightly, unmoving, his expression strained but not broken. The distance between them suddenly felt unbearable, like something far more than space had been forced in between. One of the figures beside Jungkook tilted their head, observing him with unsettling curiosity. "You're not even going to ask what the choice is." Jungkook didn't look at them. "I don't need to." Jimin's voice broke through, tense but steady. "Jungkook, don't." "I said let him go," Jungkook repeated louder now, his jaw tightening. The figure holding Jimin smiled faintly. "You misunderstand," they said. "He's not the one being tested." That made Jungkook finally turn. "What?" The two figures near him stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the unnatural cold radiating from them. "You are." Jungkook let out a short breath, anger rising fast. "Then say what you want and stop dragging this out." The tram lights flickered again, casting fractured shadows across their faces. "Simple," one of them said. "You walk toward us and don't look back." Jungkook frowned. "That's it." "If you reach us," another added calmly, "he walks free." Jimin's grip tightened against the figure restraining him. "No, no, don't listen to them." Jungkook's eyes flickered back to him instantly. "If that's all it takes." "It's not," Jimin cut in, his voice sharper now. "Nothing they do is ever that simple." The figure behind Jungkook leaned in slightly, their voice dropping to a whisper that brushed against his ear like a cold breath. "He's right, but that doesn't mean it isn't real." Jungkook clenched his fists. "What happens if I turn around?" he asked. A pause. "Then you lose him." The words landed heavier than anything else they'd said. Jimin shook his head immediately. "They're lying." "They haven't lied yet," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin froze. The truth of that hung between them, sharp and undeniable. "Jungkook," Jimin's voice softened, but there was urgency beneath it now. "Listen to me. Whatever they're doing, it's messing with perception, with memory. If you walk away from me now, you don't know what you're walking into." Jungkook swallowed hard. "I know what I'm walking away from," he said. Jimin's breath hitched. For a split second, something like hurt flickered across his face, but Jungkook saw it, and it hit deeper than he expected. "That's not what I meant," Jungkook added quickly, his voice lowering. "I'm not leaving you, I'm getting you out." "By trusting them," Jimin shot back, "after everything." Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation was enough. The figures noticed. "There it is," one murmured, "doubt." Jungkook's expression hardened instantly. "Shut up." But the damage was already there. Jimin saw it. "You don't trust me," Jimin said, quieter now. Jungkook's head snapped toward him. "That's not true." "Then why are you even considering this?" "Because you're in danger. And you think they're the solution." Jungkook stepped forward slightly, frustration breaking through. "Then what do you want me to do? Just stand here and hope they let you go?" "Yes," Jimin said immediately. Jungkook blinked. "What?" "Yes," Jimin repeated, his voice firm despite the tension in his body. "Because whatever this is, it's built on pushing you to act, to react, to choose under pressure. That's how they win." Jungkook shook his head. "Or that's how you lose." Silence. The figures watched, unmoving, almost entertained. Jimin's gaze didn't leave Jungkook. You think I can't handle this? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I've seen what they can do, Jimin. I'm not risking. Me, Jimin interrupted, something sharp flashing in his eyes. Or yourself. That hit harder than anything else. Jungkook froze. The question lingered, heavy and uncomfortable. What does that mean? He asked slowly. Jimin held his gaze. It means every time something gets real, every time things stop being clear, you try to control it, fix it, force an outcome. Jungkook scoffed quietly, and what's wrong with that? You don't fix everything by taking control, Jimin said. Sometimes you fix things by trusting the person next to you. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. Because part of him knew. Jimin wasn't wrong. The silence stretched. Then, one of the figures clapped slowly, the sound echoing unnaturally in the enclosed space. Beautiful, they said, truly. Jungkook shot them a glare. Stay out of it. But this is exactly what we wanted, another added. The conflict, the fracture. Jimin exhaled sharply. You don't get to define what this is. Oh, but we do, they replied calmly, because we created the conditions for it. Jungkook's fists clenched again. You didn't create anything. No, one of them said, stepping closer. Then why does he remember things that never happened? Jungkook's head snapped toward Jimin. What? Jimin's expression shifted, just slightly but enough. Jimin. Jimin didn't answer. Jimin, Jungkook repeated, more urgent now. What are they talking about? Jimin's gaze dropped for a moment. And that silence. It said everything. Jungkook's chest tightened. You remember something. Jimin inhaled slowly, then looked back up. I don't know if it's real, he said. Tell me. Another pause. Then. I remember you leaving, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook frowned. What? I remember a version of this, where you walked away, Jimin continued, his voice steady but distant, like he was pulling the words from somewhere deep and uncertain. Not like this, not in a tram, but you chose something else, something easier. Jungkook shook his head immediately. That didn't happen. I know, Jimin said, but it feels like it did. The air shifted again. The figures leaned in slightly, as if drawn to the moment. Jungkook stepped closer to them, ignoring the figures entirely now. Then it's fake. It's something they put in your head. Maybe, Jimin said. But it still affects you, Jungkook finished. Jimin didn't deny it. That was enough. Jungkook exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as frustration and something deeper tangled inside him. You think I'd leave you? He asked quietly. Jimin hesitated. And that hesitation. It hurt more than anything else tonight. I don't want to believe that, Jimin said. But you do, Jungkook replied. Silence. The figures smiled faintly. Time running out, one of them said softly, make your choice. Jungkook's gaze shifted between them and Jimin. The distance, the tension, the doubt, everything pressing in at once. Then, he took a step, not toward the figures, but back, away from them. I'm not playing your game, Jungkook said. The figures stilled. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. Jungkook moved again, this time straight toward Jimin. The figure holding him tightened their grip instantly. Careful, they warned. Jungkook didn't stop. You said not to trust them, he said, his voice firm now as he looked straight at Jimin. So I won't. Jimin's breath caught. But that doesn't mean I don't trust you. Something shifted in Jimin's expression, something fragile, something breaking open. Then don't come closer, Jimin said suddenly, panic flickering beneath his composure. Jungkook, stop. Jungkook shook his head. No. They want this, Jimin insisted. They want you to choose me over logic, over reality. I'm choosing you because you are my reality, Jungkook cut in. The words hit like a shockwave. Even the figures paused. Jimin stared at him, completely still. You don't know what that means, he whispered. Then tell me. I can't. Why? Jimin's voice broke slightly, because if I'm wrong. Jungkook stepped even closer now, just a few feet away. You're not. You don't know that. I don't need to, Jungkook said. I just need to know you. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. Real. The figures shifted slightly, something almost like tension creeping into their movements for the first time. Interesting, one of them murmured. Jungkook ignored them completely now. His eyes were only on Jimin. I'm not walking away, he said quietly. Not again, not in any version of this. Jimin's breathing was uneven now, his composure slipping for the first time. You're making this harder, he whispered. Jungkook's lips curved faintly, despite everything. Good. Jimin let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, fragile, disbelieving. You're impossible. And you're still here, Jungkook replied. Something in Jimin's expression softened completely. For a moment, everything else disappeared. Then, the figure holding Jimin suddenly tightened their grip sharply. Enough! The word snapped through the air like a gunshot. The tram lights flickered violently again. The space around them distorted. And the floor beneath Jungkook shifted. He stumbled slightly, catching himself. But when he looked up, Jimin was gone. Completely gone. The figures stood where he had been. All three of them now facing Jungkook. Smiling. And for the first time, Jungkook felt something colder than fear. Because this time, there was no one left to reach for. Bring him back. Jungkook's voice didn't rise, didn't shake. It dropped, heavy and dangerous, as his eyes locked onto the three figures now standing where Jimin had been. The emptiness beside him felt louder than anything, like the air itself had been torn open and left hollow. None of them moved. Then one of them smiled. Or what? The question lingered, deliberately slow, as if they were tasting every second of Jungkook's restraint. Jungkook stepped forward. Or I stopped playing along. A soft laugh slipped from another figure. You think you've been playing? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. His breathing was controlled, but something deeper was shifting beneath the surface, something darker, sharper. I think you need me, he said finally. That made them pause. Not long, but enough. Explain, one of them said. Jungkook tilted his head slightly, studying them now the way they had been studying him all this time. Everything you've done, every test, every setup, it only works if I react the way you expect. Correct. So what happens if I do? Silence. The tram creaked faintly, the metal structure groaning like it was under pressure that didn't belong to the physical world. You will, one of them said. Jungkook's lips curved slightly. That's not an answer. It's a certainty. Jungkook shook his head. No, it's a risk, and you don't like risks. Another pause. The figures exchanged a glance, less synchronized this time. Jungkook noticed. And pressed. You're observing, he continued. Pushing, adjusting, watching how I respond. That means you don't fully know what I'll do. That's the point of observation, one replied calmly. But it also means you can't control everything, Jungkook said. The air shifted again. Subtle, but real. Jungkook took another step closer, closing the gap completely now. So let me make this simple. You want to keep testing me? Fine, then give me something real. One of them raised an eyebrow slightly. Define real. Bring him back, Jungkook said, right now. And if we do? Jungkook's gaze hardened. Then I stop reacting. Silence fell harder this time. The tram lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The figures stood still, watching him carefully. "You're bluffing," one of them said. Jungkook didn't even blink. "Try me." Another long pause. Then, a low hum filled the tram. The air thickened again, pressure building like something was about to snap. Jungkook didn't move, didn't speak, didn't look away. Seconds stretched. Then, the lights went out. Total darkness. But this time, Jungkook didn't call out, didn't react. He stood completely still, his breathing slow, his mind locked into a single point of focus. Nothing. Silence. Even the unnatural presence that had filled the tram before seemed to hesitate. Then, a voice. Jungkook. Soft. Familiar. Real. Jungkook's chest tightened violently, but he didn't move. "You're really not going to look for me?" "Jimin." It was Jimin. Every instinct in his body screamed to turn, to search, to reach. But Jungkook stayed exactly where he was. "Nice try," he said quietly into the darkness. There was a pause. Then, the voice changed. Slightly off. "You're getting better," it said. The lights flickered back on. Jungkook was still standing in the same place. The three figures stood a few steps away. And between them, Jimin. This time, he was real. Jungkook knew it instantly. The way his shoulders were tense, the way his breath came unevenly, the way his eyes locked onto Jungkook with something raw and unfiltered. That wasn't imitation. That was him. "Jimin, don't move." Jimin's voice cut him off immediately. "Sharp. Urgent." Jungkook froze. "What?" he asked, confused. Jimin's eyes flicked briefly to the figures, then back to Jungkook. They're still controlling the space. "I figured that out," Jungkook said, his voice tight. "Then listen to me," Jimin said, stepping forward slightly despite the tension in his body. "You can't trust what you see, not entirely." Jungkook frowned. "I know, but I know you." "No," Jimin interrupted. "That's exactly what they're using." Jungkook's expression darkened. "I just proved I'm not falling for that." "For now," Jimin said, "but they'll escalate." One of the figures sighed softly. "You're ruining the packing." Jimin ignored them completely. His focus stayed locked on Jungkook. "Whatever happens next," he said, his voice lowering, more intense now, "you don't react immediately, you think first." Jungkook shook his head slightly. "I already tried that, it doesn't work." "Then trust me," Jimin said. The words landed differently this time. He wasn't asking. He was insisting. Jungkook hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then nodded. "Okay." The figures watched the exchange with growing interest. "Fascinating," one murmured. "Still choosing alignment," another added. The third tilted their head. "Let's see how long that lasts." Before Jungkook could respond, the tram shifted violently. Not physically, but spatially. The walls stretched, the ceiling distorted, the windows darkening until they reflected nothing but warped versions of the interior. Jungkook's breath caught. "What the?" "Don't react," Jimin said quickly. "I'm not." Then, the reflection changed. In the glass, Jungkook saw himself, but not as he was. This version of him looked different, colder, distant, his expression unreadable as he stood across from Jimin, turning away. Jungkook's chest tightened. "That's what I saw," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook's eyes flicked to him. "That's not real." "I know," Jimin said, "but it feels like it is." The reflection version of Jungkook walked away completely, leaving Jimin alone. Jimin in the reflection didn't move, didn't chase. He just stood there, breaking silently. Jungkook clenched his fists. Turn it off. The figures didn't respond. Turn it off, Jungkook repeated louder now. It's not for us, one of them said calmly, it's for him. Jimin didn't look away from the reflection. That's the part I can't shake, he admitted softly. Not the fear, not the confusion, just that moment. Jungkook stepped closer instinctively. Jimin didn't stop him this time. Look at me, Jungkook said. Jimin didn't. Jimin. Slowly. Jimin turned. Their eyes met. And Jungkook saw it clearly now. Not doubt. Not fear. But something worse. Expectation. Like part of Jimin had already accepted that version of events as inevitable. Jungkook's voice dropped. That's not how this ends. Jimin let out a small, almost broken laugh. You don't know that. I do. How? Jungkook took another step closer. Because I'm still here. The words hung between them. Simple, but heavier than anything else. Jimin's expression shifted again, something cracking beneath the surface. You weren't before, he said quietly. Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. Then that version of me was wrong. Silence. The reflection flickered. Glitched. The image of Jungkook walking away stuttered. Then froze. The figures reacted immediately. Interesting, one of them said sharper now. Jungkook didn't look at them. His focus stayed on Jimin. I'm not him, he said, and you're not alone. Jimin's breathing slowed slightly. You're making this difficult, one of the figures said. Jungkook finally turned to them. Good. The word landed with quiet force. The tram shuddered again, harder this time. The reflections shattered completely, and the space snapped back to normal. Jimin staggered slightly, catching his balance. Jungkook reached out instinctively. This time, their hands connected. Real. Solid. Jimin exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for too long. Okay, he whispered. Jungkook tightened his grip. Yeah. For a moment, everything stilled. Then, the figures stepped back. All three of them. Smiling. Congratulations, one of them said softly. Jungkook's grip tightened immediately. On what? The smile widened. You passed. Jimin's expression darkened. Past what? The tram lights flickered one last time. Then, the doors slid open. But this time, outside wasn't darkness. It was the city. Real. Alive. Lights glowing, distant traffic humming, the faint sound of life continuing like nothing had ever happened. Jungkook frowned. What is this? An exit, one of them said. Jimin didn't move. It's not that simple. It never is, they replied. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. Do we take it? Jimin hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. Careful, one of the figures added. Choices still matter. Jungkook let out a quiet breath. Then, he stepped forward, still holding Jimin's hand. Jimin followed. Slowly, cautiously, they reached the edge of the tram. The city stretched out in front of them, normal, almost too normal after everything. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Together, he asked. Jimin nodded once. Together. And with that, they stepped off the tram. The moment their feet hit the ground, the doors slammed shut behind them. Jungkook turned instantly. But the tram was already moving. Faster than it should. Faster than possible. Until it disappeared completely. Like it had never been there at all. Silence fell. The city sounds returned slowly, filling the space. Jungkook exhaled, his grip on Jimin still firm. "Is it over?" he asked. Jimin didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on something ahead. Jungkook followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped, because standing under a flickering streetlight was one of the figures, alone, waiting. And this time, it wasn't smiling. "You shouldn't have gotten off." The voice didn't echo like it had inside the tram. It was quieter now, almost human, carried by the faint hum of the city that felt too distant, too muted to be real. The streetlight above flickered once, casting uneven shadows across the single figure standing ahead of them. Jungkook didn't let go of Jimin's hand. "Then you shouldn't have let us," he replied. The figure tilted their head slightly, studying him, not like before, not with clinical detachment, but with something closer to curiosity or maybe uncertainty. "That wasn't permission," they said. "That was progression." Jimin stepped forward just a fraction, his grip tightening in return this time. "Then what is this?" he asked. "Another test." The figure's gaze shifted to him, and for the first time, there was no immediate answer. The silence stretched. Then, "No," they said. Jungkook frowned. "I don't believe you." "You don't have to," the figure replied calmly. "It doesn't change what this is." The air felt different out here, real but not entirely stable. The sounds of distant traffic warped slightly, like they were being filtered through something unseen. The buildings stood tall, but the edges of their silhouettes seemed to shimmer faintly, as if the world itself hadn't fully decided what it was yet. Jimin noticed it too. "We're not fully out," he said under his breath. The figure smiled faintly. "You never were." Jungkook's jaw tightened, then "End it." A pause. "End what?" "This," Jungkook said, gesturing sharply between them, the space, everything that had happened. "The games, the illusions, the manipulation, whatever you're trying to prove, end it." The figure watched him for a long moment. "You still think this was about proving something?" they asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate. "Then explain it." Another silence. Then the figure took a slow step forward, not threatening, not aggressive, just closer. "You were right about one thing," they said. "We needed you to react." Jungkook scoffed quietly. "That's not new information." "But not for the reason you think." Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then what reason?" The figure's gaze moved between them, lingering just a moment longer than before, like they were observing something they hadn't expected to matter. "Because reaction reveals structure," they said. Jungkook frowned. "That still doesn't mean anything." "It means," the figure continued, "that under pressure, under distortion, under uncertainty, what remains is what's real." Jimin's expression shifted slightly. "So this was what? A psychological experiment?" "If that makes it easier to understand." Jungkook shook his head. "No, don't simplify it now, not after everything." The figure didn't argue. Instead, they asked quietly, "When you saw him disappear, what did you feel?" Jungkook stilled. The question hit harder than he expected. "Anger," he said after a moment, "fear, and..." He stopped. The figure waited. Jungkook exhaled slowly. "Certainty." Jimin glanced at him, something soft flickering across his expression. The figure noticed. "And when you saw him walk away?" they asked, turning to Jimin. Jimin's gaze dropped for a second, then lifted again. "I felt like I already lost him," he admitted. The words settled heavily in the air. The figure nodded once, almost thoughtfully. "And yet," they said, "you're both still here." Jungkook's grip on Jimin tightened slightly, because that wasn't real. No, the figure said, because you chose against it. Silence. Jimin's brow furrowed. What does that mean? The figure's expression softened, just barely. It means, they said, you weren't being forced into outcomes. Jungkook's eyes sharpened. That's not true, you controlled everything. We controlled the environment, the figure corrected, not the choice. Jimin inhaled slowly, processing. So the fear, he said quietly, the doubt, the memories. Amplified, the figure said, not created. Jungkook shook his head. That doesn't make it better. It wasn't meant to. The honesty in that answer cut deeper than anything else they'd said. The streetlight flickered again. This time it dimmed slightly. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Then why stop, he asked, turning back to the figure. If this was all about observation, why let us leave? The figure didn't answer immediately. When they did, their voice was quieter. Because the outcome stabilized. Jungkook frowned, meaning. The figure held his gaze. Meaning you stopped breaking. The words lingered. Heavy. Final. Jungkook didn't respond right away. He looked at Jimin instead, really looked this time, not through tension or fear or urgency, but clearly. Jimin met his gaze. And for the first time since the tram, there was no distortion between them. No reflection. No interference. Just real. You still doubt me? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin hesitated. Then shook his head. No, he said, I doubt everything else, not you. Jungkook let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Good, he murmured. The figure watched them, silent. Then, the streetlight flickered one last time. And went out. Darkness fell, but not the suffocating, consuming kind from before, just ordinary night. Jungkook's eyes adjusted quickly. The figure was gone. No sound. No movement. Just gone. Jimin exhaled slowly. Okay. Jungkook looked around, scanning the street, the buildings, the empty space where everything had felt wrong just moments ago. No. It felt normal. Completely, almost eerily normal. Is it actually over? He asked. Jimin didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward slightly, looking down the street, then up at the dim sky, then back at Jungkook. I think so, he said. Jungkook studied him for a second. You don't sound convinced. Jimin huffed a quiet breath. After everything we just went through, I don't think convinced is something I can be right now. Jungkook almost smiled. Well. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable this time, not tense, just quiet. Real. Then Jimin spoke again. That memory, he said, the one where you walked away. Jungkook's expression shifted slightly. Yeah. Jimin looked at him carefully. I don't feel it anymore. Jungkook blinked. What do you mean? I mean it's still there, Jimin said, but it doesn't feel like something that's going to happen. Jungkook let out a slow breath. Good, he said softly. Jimin tilted his head slightly. You're not even going to ask why. Jungkook shook his head. No, he said, because I already know. Jimin raised an eyebrow faintly. Oh. Jungkook stepped a little closer, not urgent, not tense, just enough to close the space that had once felt impossible to cross. Because I didn't walk away, he said. Jimin held his gaze. No, he agreed quietly, you didn't. The city moved around them, distant cars, faint lights, the soft pulse of a world that had never stopped, even when theirs had twisted into something unrecognizable. Jungkook glanced down briefly at their hands. Still intertwined. He didn't let go. Neither did Jimin. So what now? Jungkook asked. Jimin followed his gaze, then looked back up. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, we go forward, he said. Jungkook nodded once. Together. Jimin's lips curved faintly. Together. And this time, there was no distortion, no flicker, no hidden reflection waiting to contradict it. Just the quiet certainty of a choice that didn't need to be tested anymore. They walked, side by side, leaving the empty street behind them, not as an escape, not as a victory, but as something simpler, something more grounded. A continuation. And somewhere, far beyond what they could see or understand, whatever had been watching stopped, because for the first time, there was nothing left to measure.